Pemex. What a fucking mess. In case you missed the last video, or you need a refresher, Pemex is a Mexican state-owned space exploration company who for decades have been trying to be the first company to get an oil refinery launched into space. I mean, Pemex is a state-owned oil and gas company who have a disastrous track record. And for decades, up until recent events, they have just had disaster after disaster after disaster, costing hundreds of people their lives. But fiery destruction and doom isn't the only thing Pemex has to offer. They have quite the track record of corruption under their belt. Like that time in 2011 when Pemex paid $9 million to transport an oil rig from the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Mexico. But there was just one little problem. That oil rig was already in the Gulf of Mexico. And when Pemex was asked nicely to punish those who were responsible, Pemex said, fuck off. Or that time between 2003 and 2012 when Reuters found more than 100 contracts worth approximately $11.7 billion, which contained some irregularities. These irregularities included overvalued contracts, ghost employees, payments for services that were never received, conflicts of interest, and more. From 2008 to 2012, Pemex was issued 274 recommendations to mend these questionable contracts. Pemex replied to 267 of these requests, but only accepted 3 of them, which is Pemex's way of saying, fuck off. And this is a really memorable case. Classic Pemex. It involved the Brazilian oil company Unigel. From 2009 to 2011, Lorenzo Aldeco and Manuel Sanchez, 2 Pemex executives, negotiated a transaction by which Pemex would sell chemicals to Unigel at a special price that would save Unigel $30 million. This transaction was undertaken without the authorization of Pemex's legal department and regardless of the fact that they had been issued a report demanding that the original contract be renegotiated. But Pemex said, and say it with me folks, fuck off. But I've saved the best for last, as if rampant corruption and an abysmal track record when it comes to safety wasn't enough. Presenting, Mexico's drug cartels are stealing oil again! And I can interpret this article title one of 2 ways. Either it's like a brother and sister fighting like, Mom, Billy's stealing oil again! Or the author is so defeated and he's like, Mexican drug cartels are stealing oil again. Big whoop. What's next? The US invades? Like, sweetie, please. As if we haven't already been dealing with a military force for decades. But all jokes aside, this is a serious issue in Mexico. And as this article points out, rather unfairly, because employees colluding with the Mexican cartels, whether it is willful or forceful, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the cartel is going to do whatever it needs to do in order to get what it wants. And if that involves threatening employees, so be it. Now, I haven't found any evidence suggesting this, but who's to say that Pemex executives aren't colluding with the cartels themselves? It's very possible that this is happening. And if it turns out that this is the case, not only would Pemex be threatening its workers' lives with abhorrent safety standards, or I should say a lack of safety standards, but they'd be threatening their workers' lives with the cartels too. What there is evidence of, however, is the military working with the cartels to steal fuel and oil, and that is absolutely terrifying. Could you imagine being a Joe Blow worker in an oil field or on a pipeline and The military is basically running a racket for the cartel, and there's nothing you can do. But that's where I'm going to leave Mexico and Pemex, because I have some unfinished business with another oil corporation. And that's right, I'm looking at you, ExxonMobil, you greasy little turd. You think I'd talk about Pemex and BP and not you? Oh no, you're not getting out of this that easily. Like my ass leaks greasy black tar into the toilet after too much Taco Bell, by your powers combined, you and BP have together managed to pollute the earth with so much crude oil, it is unfathomable. For those of you who don't know or don't remember, or you're living under a rock in whatever la-la land you exist in, the Exxon Valdez was an oil tanker that crashed off the coast of Alaska on March 22, 1989. It lost a total nearing 322,000 barrels of oil. And why did this happen, you ask? Because of inadequate training, fatigue, and inadequate drug and alcohol screening before this ship left port. Oil is so profitable, and we're so dependent on it, ExxonMobil saw it fit to be this goddamn lazy.
Wow, you drizzle sparingly with a touch of oil, but look at it. I've got little swimming pools, little miniature bathtubs full of oil floating on the side. It's gross.
And it spawned images like this, and like this. And what have we learned since then? Not a goddamn thing. Not a goddamn thing at all. And that brings me neatly along to the industrial mishaps which ExxonMobil has had. There's no shortage of them. First up, on November 22nd, 2016, an isobutane release occurred in the sulfuric acid alkylation unit at the ExxonMobil refinery in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which resulted in 4 serious injuries to workers and injured 2 others. The incident occurred during minor maintenance on a flammable isobutane line which failed, releasing isobutane in the unit, which ignited. And why did this happen? A complete lack of standard. Employees weren't trained up to par. There was no written procedure detailing the steps necessary to remove a gearbox plug valve. There were 2 different models, an older model and an updated model that was safer. And the employees couldn't tell the difference between the 2 gearbox assemblies, making a disaster like this a guarantee, all because of a complete lack of standard. A year earlier, February 18th, 2015, an explosion in a gas line processing unit at the ExxonMobil refinery in Torrance, California led to 2 workers suffering minor injuries and debris being dispersed into the surrounding community. Why? Because ExxonMobil did not establish a safe operating limit for what they were trying to do. ExxonMobil reused a procedure developed for a similar maintenance operation in 2012 that allowed deviation from typical refinery safety requirements, but it was not sufficient for what they were trying to do in 2015. ExxonMobil operated FCC unit equipment beyond its predicted safe operating life. Call BP in here because you know what time it is. It's time to run it to failure, boys! And if you find yourself asking why, beyond the scope of industrial accidents, mishaps, and disasters, I'll tell you why. Here's why. ExxonMobil, along with other oil companies, car manufacturers, and coal companies, knew that the use of fossil fuels would lead to climate change. And what was done about it? Nothing. And greasy, round-headed losers aren't in short supply to help champion the cause of poor big oil. One of those round-headed losers was going off about something recently. No, not that one. Not that one. Hey, there we go, that's the one. Everyone's least favorite Ted.
You look in the state of Texas, Texas is booming because we understand low taxes, low regulations let small businesses grow. It's why people from all over the country move to Texas, and I think we need to move the rest of the country in the direction of the policies that work here in Texas, policies that produce lots of jobs with high wages and lots of opportunity so that all of us can provide for our kids and provide for our future.
This round-headed weasel of a man has the audacity to say all of that to the camera with a straight face. Let's go back to the Cuyahoga River in Ohio. The year is 1964. They're inspecting the sludge that is on top of the river because of all of the industrial pollution. Everyone knew it was polluted, but pollution meant industry was thriving. The economy was booming, and everyone had jobs. Does this sound familiar? Does it, Ted? Does it ring a fucking bell? No, of course not. Inside that skull of yours is a brain so smooth you could slip right off it. You disgusting little puke. You want to know what the future looks like? I got news for you, Teddy boy. We're already living in it. Welcome to the future. For us, for you, for our kids, for everyone. And if you ever feel compelled to do something, here's what you can do, Teddy. You can take yourself, every other shill, and grifter, and crawl back into whatever tar pit you spawned from, you scum. That's all.